She is also a Nikon ambassador, and I met Kristi several years ago through colleagues of Nikon, and her work is nothing less than spectacular. She's not only a wedding photographer, but she's also a wildlife photographer. In a weird way, those two things mix at times, don't they, Kristi? So without wasting any more time, let's jump up to the next program. Let me introduce Nikon ambassador Kristi Odom to the Nikon Theater stage, CES 2019.
Thank you. I want to thank you guys all for being here. I want to give a giant thank you to Nikon. This is an amazing lineup, and I'm so honored to be a part of it again. I'm going to start by talking about how happy I am to be a photographer. This world is so big, and it is so beautiful, and it is full of so much life, and so much energy, and so much motion. And I love that we can grab moments of that. We can grab little portions of a second, and we can keep those forever. But for me, this world is overwhelming, and because it is so big and so wild, sometimes I want to incorporate motion into my work. Sometimes I want to show the movement and the life and the chaos. And so my talk today is on how to get motion in a single image. I'm going to talk a little bit about stacking time lapses, long exposures, daylight long exposures, using body language for motion. And I'm going to talk a little bit and show some techniques. But first, I've started by making a little video that I've made with my D850 and my Z7 on how fast I see this world. I find it such a gift to be a photographer. I find it such a gift to be able to take these little moments and keep them forever. Today, I'm going to start by talking about the simple way of seeing emotion just in body language. I was in the Masai Mara, and I saw this cheetah on the hunt in the hill. When I saw the cheetah on the hunt, my driver all of a sudden just starts trying to rev his engine to go super close. I'm like, no, let's stay back. Because there's such simplicity in shape. And it's like in the body moments, in the body motion, you can see what's about to happen. You can see this cheetah that is approaching his prey. I took this image with my Nikon D850, my favorite lens, the 200 to 500 f5.6. I shot it at 1/1600. I exposed for the sky. I blew it out a little bit. There was a lot of contrast. It was midday. But I wanted to do that because I really wanted to emphasize shape. Sometimes we see motion just in reactions of water, right below the surface. This is a marine iguana, and the way his tail hit the surface caused all these bubbles. I love putting my Nikon cameras in acolyte housings and bringing them right underwater, and I love what happens right below the surface, because I love seeing things react to one another. Right when a bird has an unsuccessful fishing trip, and right when he leaves the water, you can see movement in shape, and you can see movement in the way the water is reacting. So this is the simplest way of seeing motion, and now we're going to go into something a little bit more complicated. This is the first image I took where I fully felt that I used motion in a way that enhanced the narrative. I was on safari, we're driving, and there's all these zebras, and they're just kind of standing there doing nothing on the side of the road, kind of being boring-like. And I really wanted to photograph them, and I started to think, well, I love patterns, and I'm really fascinated by the patterns on the back of a zebra. And I've read all these theories of why zebras have stripes. And one of the most popular theories on why zebras have stripes is because they blend into the tall grass and they blend into the background, which confuses the prey. I'm like, that's a really interesting narrative. I wonder if I can add that into a story somehow. So while we're driving past these zebras, I asked the driver to not stop when he heard me click my camera, because they always do that. And I focused in on the zebras, and I slowed the shutter down to about 1/15 of a second. And when we passed, I got this pattern that enhanced that story. When you find these trick techniques, it's always good to use them to enhance your narrative. And that's what gives your imagery an extra kick and an extra pop. Because the animals are always on a move. Unless you're photographing koalas, like all the time, who sleep, 22 hours a day or 20 hours a day? I mean, elephants run, and when they run, they've got these giant feet that just go against the ground in this beautiful, beautiful fashion. So slowing my shutter down a little bit, I wanted to show that movement. Whenever I'm doing long exposure shots or longer exposure shots, I like to start at 1/15 of a second, and then I kind of move from there. This shot was taken with my D850, 200 to 500 lens. I love that Nikon lens. ISO 320, my shutter was 1/40th of a second to get that movement. For this kangaroo, I did a little bit of panning. I took my Nikon D4S, 70 to 200, and I focused in on the kangaroo, and I moved with it. So every time I pressed that shutter, I moved with the camera. With that, I got the streaks in the same direction that the kangaroo was jumping in to show the direction and the movement. I love trying to show color and the colors that come out in the longer exposures. So this was shot with my 850 at 1/40th of a second. And I really love how the color in the ground mimics the color of the lion's paws. Once again, the reaction of water with animals and how it splashes and the direction that the water goes in. By slowing my shutter down to 1/15th of a second, I was able to show a little bit of the movement there. One of my favorite places in the entire world is Brooks Falls at Katmai National Park. You show up, you take this little tiny plane, go out to this area, you hike out to this platform, and you see this. See these bears going crazy, right? I sit there and I go, how am I ever going to do this beautiful place justice? How am I ever going to capture this? You've got this guy, he's the same as this guy, fishing in the bottom corner, looking around. You've got this guy hunting at the very top, fishing at the very top. You've got this rock in the background. You've got all these. One time we went out to the platform, there's 40 bears. I'm sitting there going, how in the world am I going to capture this to bring it home? Because this isn't, to me, a still moment. But I wanted to grab it as a still moment. So the first shot that I did was this guy. I was really fascinated. He was closest to the camera, had this great water coming around. I slowed that shutter down, and I took this image, which I absolutely love. Once again, I'm so obsessed with shape that I did expose for the water, and I silhouetted him. I shot this with my Nikon D5, my 200 to 500 5.6 lens. I used a monopod. This platform has all different rules depending on the time of year you go. Sometimes you can use a monopod. Sometimes you can't use anything. Sometimes you can use a tripod. So I had my monopod, and that helped me stabilize the image a little bit. And I used the Manfrotto monopod for that. Then I went to the guy that was fishing up top. did a slower shutter of him and the fish that were kind of jumping. And it was really nice because once I slowed that shutter down, this was shot at 1/15 of a second with my D5. Once I slowed that shutter down a little bit, these beautiful colors came out, which I absolutely loved. But the sense of movement of the bear fishing was what I really wanted to capture. At the very bottom of the falls, at 1/25 of a second, I shot one of the bears shaking the water off. And I love the patterns when animals move and when they shake. I love the patterns of what the water looks like coming off their bodies. One of the guys at the bottom, he went and stood on a rock. One of the things I notice about bears is when they fish, they're sometimes super still. And this stillness is so beautiful in contrast to the movement of the rush in the water. So I really wanted to capture the stillness of that bear just standing, and then the water all around, and a little bit of the lines and the flow of the water. This was on one of the days that we were not allowed a tripod or a monopod. So what did I do? I laid on the ground, and this is how I took that shot. One of the things that I've learned is I'm a minimalist with my gear, so not a lot of times do I have equipment with me. Like, not a lot of times do I have my monopod or my tripod. So I've started to learn that I can use my bones. Use my bones as stabilization. So I use my bones on the ground, bone to hard surface, stabilizing my camera on my palms. And I've also noticed you can use that on your wall. You use bones, and that is much more stable than if you're trying to hold things a little bit less. Like with your muscles. Bones are always more stable. I had this girl that shot with me for a while, and she was like a yoga instructor, and she was able to slow her shutter down super slow and get long exposure shots without a tripod. And I'm going, what are you doing? And she was holding these yoga poses that she was just like super zen with. I'm going, oh, that's really cool. And I started to learn I could actually control my breathing too. Like when I hold my breath in, I'm a little shaky. But there's a moment after the exhale where I'm totally still. So even though I'm in that position, I'm down at 1/20th of a second, and I want that bear to be sharp. So I'm breathing in a way where I'm exhaling, and then I'm pressing the shutter. And that reduces my own camera shake. Brooks Falls is great, too, because it's not just the bears. You look up in the skies, and you see the birds. You see the bald eagles, which are so beautiful and phenomenal. And I'm really fascinated with birds. I really love thinking about how it feels to be a bird flying through the sky and what the colors might look like. So I like to slow down my shutter to kind of feel what the sky might look like if I'm rushing past. Different patterns, different things coming out. There's another series that I've kind of started, and I've started playing with a little bit. I've noticed that we see these beautiful, beautiful scenes, these beautiful mountains out the window all the time. We have these landscapes that just pass us by when we're driving. I mean, how often do you see something beautiful, but you don't even get out of the car? You drive past, you have a look. And I think there's something really fascinating about this moving landscape. So I've started a moving landscape project where I focus on something in the far distance. I throw my shutter down. This was at 1/13th of a second. And I let all the trees that are passing the car fast kind of kaleidoscope the image. So this image was shot with my Nikon Z7 with my Nikkor 24-70, f/22 shutter 1/13th of a second. And it left that mountain in focus, but yet the trees kind of gave this beautiful texture in the foreground. I've been doing the same thing on trains. And on trains, it's just so stunning because the lines in the foreground are stunning, and they're beautiful. Another way to kind of capture motion in landscapes is to use daylight long exposure film, daylight long exposures filters. I'm a morning person. I'm early to wake up, but I'm not early to get on location. I like chilling out, having a cup of tea, making breakfast. So sometimes I end up somewhere beautiful, and it's 12 o'clock. And if you guys ever ended up somewhere at like 12 o'clock and there's so much bright light that there's not a lot you can do with it, your camera won't even go below 1/60th of a second because there's so much light on the subject. So one thing that these lenses do, these filters, for this image, I used a 9-stop neutral density filter. The cameras are getting so good that they're letting in so much light, which is great. We can do low light photography. We can take photos in all different situations. But there's that rare chance that you really want to slow that camera down to take a long exposure. During the middle of the day, with a 9-stop neutral density filter, I was able to shoot for 10 seconds. So every stop is twice as much light or half as much light, depending on where you're going. So if your camera's giving you the slowest shutter of 1/60th of a second, one stop is 1/30th, another stop is 1/15th. So being able to have 9 stops of neutral density means I can slow my camera down 9 stops and get that much more exposure time for my image. So I was able to take something that had a little bit more flow and a little bit more move in a midday shot. I used a GorillaPod. I love these little GorillaPods, so I put it on the ground. I always do self-timer because I don't want my finger to shake the camera. So I did the 10-second self-timer, pressed the button, stood back, and I got a little bit more movement. Another thing I've been doing, which I've been having a lot of fun with, is I absolutely love taking time-lapse images. Now, I don't do time-lapse for the sake of time-lapse, but I do time-lapse for the sake of stacking my time-lapse to get even longer exposures. I took a couple hundred images. I went into Photoshop. You can go into Photoshop. You load all your images as a stack. You blend them, and you get this sort of image. So I can photograph for 30 minutes and get one shot that was taken during the daytime that shows how the clouds are moving over this mountain range. Whenever you're doing this sort of image stack, it's really cool to watch the direction of the clouds, watch the direction of the sky. And I was really lucky here because the direction of all of these clouds were going right into right into Joshua Tree, and I was able to get this sort of really long exposure once I did the stack. One of the greatest things, I've become a big fan of our Z7. One of the greatest things about the Z7 is you can kind of carry it everywhere. So I've noticed I've started getting a lot more photos of the moments that I might not expect, more moments of things that maybe I just want to keep. I remember when I got called and I got asked to be a Nikon ambassador, I was like so excited. I was so excited. But the first thing I did was I said, how do I make myself a stronger photographer? So I actually signed up to go back to school. I'm taking classes right now with 7 out in Poland. So I'm doing the 7 master class where I get to learn from the best documentary photographers in the world. And so I keep going to and from Poland every 3 months. And I've been working with this amazing mentor, Ed Kashi, who's with Nat Geo. And I'm working on building my documentary skills. And my last trip to Poland was absolutely amazing. It was great. So my last trip, though, I bought this little purse. It was like a camera bag purse, and I could fit that Z7 24-70 in that bag and just carry it around with me, carry it around all over. And I started getting photos of things that I just didn't expect. Going out to dinner with my significant other and like what the sky looked like, reflections that I see in the water and the snow. And I started being able to capture all these little things that I might not have seen before. It's really nice, too, because these memories are so special to us. And I love how photography is becoming more and more accessible. We're able to take 45.7 megapixel files with a camera that fits inside a purse. That's pretty phenomenal. So I started grabbing things that reminded me of my trip, seeing a fire-breathing dragon and seeing these swans in Krakow that were super friendly. They were coming up and coming all around. And I was like, these guys are so awesome. So I've noticed that I've started taking more photos. This camera is making me take more and more photos. I slowed down my shutter to get a little bit of the movement of the swans, a little bit of the movement in the water. This was taken at 1/15th of a second with that Z7. Same thing here. Now, one of the most amazing things happened. Poland was a big trip for me for many reasons, but I actually got proposed to, which I'm very happy and excited about. And, sorry, after the moment, me and my fiance, we ended up at this Christmas market. okay? And it was a really beautiful moment for me. So I had this little purse in the camera, and I actually had the GorillaPod. And I put the camera up. We had a couple of hot glute wines. Have any of you guys ever been to a European Christmas market? It's like amazing. It's beautiful. So while I'm sitting there drinking these hot wines, I'm taking this time-lapse. And the time-lapse was for the sake of doing another time-lapse stack. Because there's so much craziness and chaos that I really wanted to see what happened when I combined a whole bunch of images. So this was a single image. It was one of my favorite frames from that time-lapse. These were my settings. This was taken with the Z7, the 24-70. It was a 5-second f/22 exposure. The most interesting thing happened when I put that stack together. Instead of motion, instead of movement, what I saw was everybody disappeared. And I got this still moment that will forever, to me, be a memory of, even though there was all that chaos and everything going on, and it was such a beautiful high moment in my life, it was just me and him. And it was such a special time, and I'm really happy to have this image for me. Another way I've been showing movement, one of the things I love doing with my photography is I love connecting people emotionally to wildlife. We share this world with so many emotionally intelligent beings. And I want to use the camera to get people to feel, to get people to understand wildlife in a way that they want to conserve and help this beautiful planet. So instead of capturing motion in a single frame, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I put emotion together by pairing images inside a picture frame. And I've started to play with the concept of consecutive frames and how putting images that are taken pretty soon after one another, how reflecting and putting them next to each other can show movement. And I love this series of the whale sharks because to me, when I saw them, I felt this beautiful dance in the light. By putting them in this strip like this, I can feel that dancing again. And that's what I really wanted to say as a photographer, is I really wanted to show how beautiful and how playful these amazing animals are. I've been taking these consecutive frames and mirroring them, putting one image, maybe the next image, or maybe 5 images down in a frame, and putting them one on one side and one on the other, and having a photograph of the moment before the emotion and the moment of the emotion. And so people felt encased and really could feel that emotion of these lions coming out more. And I've been having so much fun with this series that I've been doing a lot of it. Little things like the mama bear fishing and the baby cub like, come on, Mom, when's dinner coming? Getting tired on her back, and the way that the cub moves her paws in order to show like love and affection, but maybe a little boredom at the same time. The orangutans, the way they call, the way that they make their mating sounds. Such a beautiful, overwhelming feeling. And sometimes there's movement in the simple things. I love how orangutans have this confidence in the way they put their chin up, It's like, don't mess with me. I love it. And little things, the way they touch themselves and the way they move. By putting these consecutive frames and mirroring them, it helps me feel that moment before and after. A lion playing in the sun and stretching. I can't get enough of orangutans. This is something I've been doing a lot of, and I've been having so much fun with putting this series together. More of the little things, the way that the monkeys put their hands on their knees and the way that they move, brings out all these moments that I may not have seen before. Simple gestures. There's so much that can be said with gestures. It's so interesting how much of communication happens with body language. And by looking at body language in animals, I connect a lot more. Connect by gestures. I connect by seeing how they touch, how they interact, how they move, how their body language is. How mom plays with her little child. This is a mother orangutan tickling her daughter, and her daughter little boy orangutan, tickling her son, and the son just laughing and enjoying it. I got to watch these guys for a little while, and they just had this connection. And this connection that was just so beautiful and so pure, and it makes you feel like you're part of such a bigger whole. Have you guys had these moments where it's like something overwhelms you to the point where the whole world disappears and you have these split seconds of pure beauty? I have that moment so much when I'm looking through my camera, when I'm zoomed into a subject and I see this interaction, I see this life, I see this emotion that makes me feel small because it makes me feel that the world is so big, and it makes me feel like it is such a gift to be a part of this world, to be a part and be able to see all this stuff with my camera. I love photography so much because it lets me grab those moments. It lets me keep those moments together, these split seconds, these 1/200th of a second, these 1/15th of a second. And I get to, how many seconds do we have in a day? It lets me take fractions of a second and keep them, have them forever, put them on my wall, put them in my pocket, put them on my phone, put them on my computer, and share them. Share these high moments in life. I want to make people feel. I know this world is crazy fast and crazy beautiful and crazy overwhelming, and I want to put that into my work. This world is so beautiful and so beyond precious, and I'm just honored to be a photographer. I want to thank you guys so much for your time today. Big thank you to Nikon. Everyone go online, watch this talk, watch all the talks. They're fantastic. Nikon event, Nikon USA Live. And thank you guys so much.